The battle between Zenitsu and Kaigaku in the Infinity Castle is one of the emotionally heaviest fights in Demon Slayer. It's not just a battle between human and demon, but also a clash of morals and a fight for Kuwajima Jigoro's legacy. In today's video, we'll explain all the stories between Kaigaku and Zenitsu that led up to their final showdown in the Infinity Castle. We know that the two swordsmen meet when they train under the Thunder Hashira Jigoro, but what were they doing before they got there? First, let's look at how Kaigaku began training under Jigoro. He was an orphan who lived at Gyomei's temple for many years, and eventually turned to stealing as a way to make his life more comfortable. While the other orphans were eating scraps to survive, Kaigaku was stealing the temple's money and living in relative comfort. However, he was caught by the other children one day, and they threw him out at night in retaliation. But this would end up hurting the orphans, as Kaigaku encountered a demon that night. Desperate to save his own life, he gave up the orphans in exchange for being spared. After the demon entered that night, he killed all the orphans except for one, who hid behind Gyomei, while he took out the demon with his bare hands. Since Kaigaku could never return to the temple after what he had done, he left the village and continued to live as a thief until he was eventually taken in by Jigoro. Before we proceed further, let's turn to Zenitsu, who was not raised by his parents as well. But unlike Kaigaku, he never became dishonest or immoral, and actually turned out to be extremely innocent and gullible. At one point in his life, Zenitsu gave up all his wealth to a girl, hoping she would fall in love with him, but she just ran away with his money, leaving Zenitsu both lonely and in debt. Jigoro found Zenitsu when he was being chased by debt collectors, and paid off the young child's debt and took him as a pupil. Now this is where Kaigaku and Zenitsu meet each other. As someone who believed that strength and survival mattered above all else, Kaigaku didn't see Zenitsu as a threat at first, and considered himself to be Jigoro's natural successor. However, Zenitsu gradually grew closer to Jigoro, calling the old Hashira Gramps. Despite his tough appearance, Jigoro also had a soft heart and grew fond of Zenitsu, eventually naming both him and Kaigaku his successors. This did not go down well with Kaigaku, who was already pretty disgusted by Zenitsu's weakness and timid nature. His reasoning wasn't too unfamiliar either, since Zenitsu often complained about training and tried to escape. One day, Zenitsu believed that the intensity of their training would kill him, and he climbed up a tree to escape Jigoro. While he was up there, Zenitsu was struck by lightning, and while he survived, his hair changed from its original black to a bright yellow color. Furthermore, Zenitsu struggled to learn any of the thunder-breathing forms aside from the first form, Thunder, Clap, and Flash. But here's where things get interesting, because Kaigaku managed to learn the remaining 5 forms under thunder-breathing aside from Thunder, Clap, and Flash. Due to their opposite personalities and mastery of thunder-breathing, Jigoro believed that Kaigaku and Zenitsu would complete each other as his successors, but ended up missing one critical detail. While Zenitsu respected Kaigaku and looked up to him despite his faults, Kaigaku absolutely hated Zenitsu and took every opportunity to discourage him from becoming a demon slayer. When Zenitsu called Jigoro Gramps, Kaigaku threw a half-eaten peach at him and told him not to get too familiar with their master. When Zenitsu kept complaining about how terrible life as a demon slayer was, Kaigaku asked him why he continued training despite being so scared. One day, Zenitsu punched a demon slayer who insulted Kaigaku behind his back. Kaigaku's response was to demand that Zenitsu quit his dream of being a demon slayer because he assaulted a higher-ranking member of the Corps. Even though Zenitsu wanted to be strong enough to fight alongside Kaigaku one day, that just wouldn't have been possible with Kaigaku's personality. The two demon slayers parted ways after Zenitsu passed his final selection, and joined the Kamaboko group along with Tanjiro and Inosuke. This means that they won't meet until much later in the story. Now we know a lot about Zenitsu's Demon Slayer journey, but what was Kaigaku doing all those years? There's not really a lot of data to go on, but we do know that he became pretty powerful as he found himself in a situation where he came face to face with the Upper Moon One Kokushibo. As for Zenitsu, he started off with a success on the Fujikasane mountain during the final selection, and was able to kill the tongue demon in the Tsuzumi mansion after he fell unconscious. This was Zenitsu's key weakness, as his fear ended up freezing him and he couldn't unlock the power of his Thunderclap and Flash without falling unconscious. This continues into the Mount Nadagumo arc as well, where he can't avoid being bitten by a spider, but manages to take out the spider demons while he's unconscious. However, this weakness turns into a strength during the Mugen Train arc, as Zenitsu is still capable of fighting while he's under the effects of Enmu's Blood Demon art. Zenitsu finally unlocks the willpower to fight consciously in the Entertainment District arc, where he has to fight against Daki. At one point, it seems as if Gyutaro has just overpowered the Slayers by incapacitating Tengen, Zenitsu, and Inosuke. However, their fighting spirit shines through, as Tengen and Inosuke fight against the poison, while Zenitsu breaks free of the rubble he's trapped under. As Tanjiro and Tengen are occupied with Gyutaro, Daki rushes in with her Obi to save him, but Zenitsu rushes to blitz her. Daki thinks she's seen it all and doesn't take Zenitsu seriously, but he manages to blitz the demon with his new technique, Thunder, Clap, and Flash, Godspeed. Since Zenitsu is not involved in the Swordsmith Village arc, our next stop is at the Hashira training arc, where Zenitsu gets some terrifying news toward the end of his training. While Kaigaku was out on a mission, he had encountered Kokushibo and realized from the demon's aura alone that he stood no chance of victory. Now, a normal demon slayer would have fought to the death despite the odds, but we know that Kaigaku is less principled than the rest. The same guy who sacrificed the orphans to spare his life decided to sacrifice his humanity as well, and accepted Kokushibo's offer to be turned into a demon in exchange for being spared. Kokushibo offered a large dose of Muzan's blood to Kaigaku, and after a torturous transformation that lasted for days, Kaigaku transformed into a powerful demon. Jigoro eventually received this news and decided to commit seppuku to atone for the sin of raising a traitor. Since there was no one nearby to complete the ritual by decapitating him, the old man died a slow and painful death by bleeding out. Zenitsu was devastated after hearing this news, and his demeanor changed completely from there on out, with his usually cheery face adopting a steely resolve to avenge his master and save his legacy. When Nakime summons all the demon slayers into the Infinity Castle, Zenitsu finds himself wandering through the twisted corridors until he hears a familiar voice behind a door. The reunion is anything but pleasant. As he draws his sword in preparation, Kaigaku mockingly greets his former junior, commenting on how long it's been since they've seen each other. But Zenitsu no longer considers Kaigaku his senior. Now that he's become a demon, Zenitsu is disgusted by Kaigaku's defection to the enemy. Kaigaku tries to provoke Zenitsu by calling him shabby and weak, but these tricks don't work anymore. Zenitsu calmly points out that Kaigaku is just a filler for Gyutaro and Daki's empty position, and is just the lowest ranked upper moon. The conversation takes a devastating turn when Kaigaku shows no remorse over Jigoro's death, believing it was justified since he got cheated out of the successor title he deserved. The battle begins with Kaigaku using his thunder-breathing techniques enhanced with the blood demon art. He attacks with fourth form, Distant Thunder, but Zenitsu easily dodges and slashes at Kaigaku's neck, calling him trash that's too slow. Kaigaku is shocked by how different this Zenitsu is from the cowardly child he knew. He remembers his humiliating encounter with Kokushibo and believes that Zenitsu is nothing compared to that overwhelming demonic presence. The demon unleashes a barrage of attacks, injuring Zenitsu and sending him falling down a shaft. As he falls, Zenitsu reflects on his relationship with Kaigaku, because despite never getting along, he and Jigoro had always cherished and respected Kaigaku. In a single devastating move, Zenitsu launches himself off a wall and uses thunder-breathing 7th form, Flaming Thunder God, to behead Kaigaku in midair. As they both fall, Kaigaku curses Zenitsu in confusion. He's never seen this technique before, and accuses Jigoro of favoring Zenitsu all along by teaching him something secret. But of course, Jigoro would never push one of them aside, and the 7th form was Zenitsu's own creation. Something he had originally hoped to use fighting alongside Kaigaku, not against him. Yushiro appears and berates the dying Kaigaku for his selfishness, telling him how pathetic it is to die alone. Kaigaku's head finally disintegrates as Zenitsu is rescued and brought to safety. In a dream sequence, Zenitsu sees Jigoro one last time. As he apologizes for being unable to get along with Kaigaku, his master looks up at him with tears in his eyes and says the words Zenitsu needed to hear. "Zenitsu, you are my pride and joy." In the end, it wasn't about who mastered more forms or who was stronger. It was about who truly embodied the spirit their master tried to teach them. And that's what makes this fight one of the most emotionally devastating in all of Demon Slayer. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another deep dive into the Demon Slayer universe.